Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The snow had come early that year, thick and heavy as wool, draping the north in silence. Winterfell's great hall burned bright with fire, but beyond its walls, the land was already deep in frost. Ravens flew low through the gray sky, their wings black as ash, bearing grim tidings from every corner of the realm. In the north, they said, the cold never truly left. It only slept. Sir Jorah Stark had always believed that. A cousin to Lord Eddard, he had spent his youth in the shadow of the Great Keep, training in the yard and riding through the Wolfswood. While his kin ruled and warred, Jorah had been given a different charge: to hold Last Hearth, the seat of House Umber, and guard the lands that bordered the haunted forest beyond the wall. It was a lonely duty, but the Starks had always believed in such vigilance, for the North remembered. One dawn, as the first pale light crept over the snowy hills, Jorah stood on the battlements of Last Hearth, watching the horizon. A cold wind blew down from the frost fangs, and he could feel the bite of it in his bones. His direwolf, Greyfang, padded beside him, its fur silver white and its eyes glinting like cold steel. A rider approached through the drifting snow, one of the Umbermen, half frozen and pale with fear. "Sir Stark," the man gasped, sliding from his saddle. "We've found them again." Jorah's brow furrowed. "Where?" "Near the village of Harn's Rest. The folk are gone, all of them. No tracks, but theirs." The man's eyes darted toward the dark forest. He would not say the word, but Jorah understood. The dead. He dismissed the man and ordered his men to prepare. He'd heard whispers all autumn, livestock found torn apart, shepherds missing, strange lights in the trees at night, but such tales were as old as the wall itself. Even so, something felt different this time. The cold had a sharpness that bit deeper than memory. That evening, Jorah gathered his men in the courtyard. 10 seasoned riders of the north, men who'd fought wildlings and worse. Their cloaks were fur-lined, their blades well-honed, their faces grim. "Whatever lies north of here," Jorah said, "we face it together. The Umbers say whole villages vanish. We'll find the cause and end it. We are Starks of Winterfell. Winter is our element." A few men chuckled quietly, but the sound was uneasy. Even among northerners, there were tales no one laughed at. By nightfall, they rode out beneath a sky strewn with stars, the moon casting a ghostly sheen over the snow. The air grew colder with each mile until their breath steamed thick as fog. Greyfang trotted ahead, nose to the wind, ears twitching. They passed empty cottages, doors hanging open, hearths cold and long abandoned. Not even crows lingered. Once, they found a sleigh overturned by the road, half buried in frost. Inside lay a woman and her child, frozen where they'd fallen, their eyes wide and white. "Gods be good," muttered one of the riders. "Keep moving," Jorah ordered softly. By dawn, they reached Harn's Rest, or what was left of it. The village stood silent beneath a coat of ice. Doors were broken, windows shattered, and the snow was streaked with something dark, blood frozen in place. Greyfang growled low in his throat. The men spread out carefully, swords drawn, their boots crunching in the brittle frost. Jorah knelt beside a fallen man half buried near the well. He brushed the snow from the man's face and froze. The eyes were open, the skin pale as milk, but the flesh was unbroken. No wound, no sign of struggle. The man looked almost asleep, until his eyes snapped toward Joran. He recoiled, staggering back as the corpse sat upright, mouth opening in a soundless moan. The dead man's fingers reached for him, stiff as bone. "7 hells," one of the riders shouted, cleaving the thing's head from its shoulders. Still it twitched, thrashing in the snow. Then came another, and another. From the shadows of the houses, from beneath the frozen drifts, the dead began to stir. The riders fought fiercely, steel flashing, the clash of iron echoing through the still air. But for every corpse they felled, 2 more rose. The dead did not bleed. They did not fall easily. Only fire stopped them, and there was precious little of that in a village of ice. "Fall back," Joran roared. "To the horses!" They mounted and fled south through the storm, the wind howling like the cries of ghosts. Behind them, the dead followed, slowly, but without rest, without fear, without life. For 2 days, they rode without sleep. One by one, their torches died. When they finally stopped to make camp, only 6 men remained. The rest had fallen behind, or vanished into the snow. Joran stared into the small fire they'd built, its light flickering weakly against the white dark. The men huddled close, silent. No one spoke of what they'd seen, but all knew it. The dead walked again. Greyfang lifted his head, ears pricking toward the trees. "What is it, boy?" Joran whispered. A shadow moved beyond the light, then another. The fire crackled, and the snow began to fall thicker, muffling all sound. Joran reached for his sword, but it was already too late. The night had come alive, and winter, he realized, was not just coming. It was here. The storm did not break for 3 days. The wind came howling down from the north, sharp as blades, flaying the skin from their cheeks and freezing the blood in their veins. The snow fell so thick it turned the world into a blur of white. Trees, sky, and ground all became one unending shroud. Sir Joran Stark pressed on through the blizzard, leading his men by the faint glow of a dying torch. The horses stumbled and snorted, breath steaming like smoke. Greyfang trotted ahead, his fur rimed with frost, his growl low and constant. "7 save us," muttered Harl, one of the riders, clutching his cloak tight. "We'll freeze before we see the wall." "No one dies yet," Joran said, his voice a rasp. "Not while I still breathe." Behind him, 5 men remained, loyal northerners, hardened by battle and cold. Yet even they looked hollow-eyed, haunted. The memory of the village clung to them like frostbite, the corpses that would not die, the sound of brittle bones cracking under steel, the smell of rot buried beneath snow. They found shelter at last in a hollow near the base of a rocky hill, a place where the wind screamed less fiercely. There, they built a fire from what dry wood they could find, broken branches, a splintered sled, even a torn shield. The flames licked weakly at the air, barely enough to keep them alive. Joran crouched near the fire, eyes fixed on the woods beyond. "They'll come for us," he murmured. No one questioned whom he meant. Harl spat into the snow. "We burned those devils good. Naught left but ash." Joran shook his head. "The fire won't hold them forever. The cold's their ally. It hides their scent, their sound." He glanced at Greyfang, whose ears twitched toward the trees. "When they come, the wolf will know first." A heavy silence followed. The fire popped and the shadows shifted. Then, from the edge of the dark, a voice called, "Sir Stark." The men leapt to their feet, blades drawn. The voice came again, hoarse, pleading, faint. "Sir Stark, help me." A figure staggered from the blizzard, cloaked and hooded, moving like a man half dead. Joran caught him before he fell. Beneath the ice-crusted hood was a young ranger of the Night's Watch, pale and trembling. His face was gaunt, his lips blue. From the shadow tower, he gasped. We were hunting, a band of wildlings, but they... He broke off, eyes wide with terror. They came for us in the dark. Sir, they rose from the snow. We burned what we could, but... Easy, Joran said, easing him down by the fire. How many survived? None, the ranger whispered. Only me. The men exchanged uneasy glances. One of them muttered a prayer to the old gods. Joran gave the young man water and wrapped him in a spare cloak. But the ranger's hands trembled violently, and his eyes darted to the shadows beyond the fire, as though seeing things none of them could. When at last he slept, Joran turned to his men. We ride at dawn. We make for Castle Black. If the dead walk, the watch must know. Aye, said Harl, though his voice was thin. And what if the storm swallows us first? Then the gods can sort our bones, Joran said. The storm lessened by morning, though the sky remained a dull gray. They rode south through waist-deep snow, the ranger half-conscious on a spare horse. The woods were silent. No bird, no beast, no sound save the crunch of hooves. Once they passed a set of prints, bare feet, small as a child's, leading into the forest. None dared follow them. As night approached, they came upon the ruins of a watchtower long abandoned, its stones cracked and half swallowed by ice. It offered little shelter, but it was shelter nonetheless. Inside, they found the remains of an old fire pit, a few broken crates, and a rusted sword leaning against the wall. The ranger stirred weakly as they laid him down. Sir Stark, he whispered, don't let the fire die. Promise me. I promise, Joran said, though his heart was heavy. The men took turns keeping watch. The snow outside glowed faintly in the moonlight, and the trees beyond stood like silent sentinels. When Joran's turn came, the night was still. The fire had burned low. He threw on more wood, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Greyfang sat beside him, tail twitching, eyes fixed on the door. Then came the sound, a faint scratching, like nails against stone. Joran rose slowly, drawing his sword. Who goes there? He called softly. The scratching stopped. A long moment passed. Then came the thud, heavy, deliberate, against the outer door. Once, twice. The others stirred. Harl reached for his axe. 7 hells, he breathed. They found us. The door shuddered beneath the blows. Snow sifted from the ceiling. Greyfang snarled, his hackles rising. Keep the fire high, Joran ordered. Don't let it go out. The door burst open, and the cold rushed in with a scream of wind. Figures filled the doorway, twisted shapes of ice and flesh, eyes burning blue as frost fire. The whites came without sound. Steel clashed, flames flared. The tower filled with chaos and horror. Harl struck one down, but its severed hand clawed at his throat. Another rider fell with a cry, blood freezing before it hit the ground. Joran fought like a man possessed, his sword flashing silver in the firelight. Greyfang leapt upon one of the creatures, tearing at its throat. But for every one they burned, 2 more pressed forward. Then the ranger, silent until now, screamed. Joran turned. The young man's eyes had gone pale blue, his breath a cloud of frost. He lunged, inhuman strength in his limbs, knocking Joran to the ground. With a cry, Greyfang leapt, dragging the thing away. Joran seized a burning brand from the fire and drove it into the ranger's chest. The stench of burnt flesh filled the tower as the creature shrieked and collapsed. The others fell back toward the fire. Only 3 remained. Out! Joran shouted. "We ride!" They fled into the storm once more, the tower collapsing behind them in flame and ruin. When at last they stopped, miles away, only Joran and Greyfang still lived. The snow had ceased. The world lay quiet again. Joran looked back toward the dark horizon where the tower had stood. Smoke rose faintly into the pale sky. He sank to his knees, exhausted, and whispered the words his house had carried for generations. Winter is coming. And for the first time in his life, he understood what it truly meant. The dawn that followed was pale and brittle. The sky stretched thin and white as bleached bone. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a wasteland of silence. Snow blanketed the forest so deeply that even sound itself seemed smothered beneath it. Sir Joran Stark stood alone beside the ashes of a dying fire, his cloak stiff with frost, his hands numb despite the gloves. Greyfang lay close at his side, eyes half closed, his breath rising in slow, steaming plumes. Around them stretched miles of untouched snow, save for the blackened mark where the old tower had burned. The last of Joran's men were gone, swallowed by the storm or by the dead. He did not know which was worse. He knelt in the snow, pressing a hand to Greyfang's flank. "We'll see Winterfell again," he murmured, though his voice was hoarse and hollow. "By the old gods we will." The direwolf lifted his head and gave a low, rumbling growl, ears pricking toward the woods. "Something comes," Joran whispered. At first, he thought it was the wind again, whistling through the trees. But then came the faint jingle of metal, a harness, a bridle, and the crunch of hooves over crusted snow. Joran drew his sword and crouched low. From between the pines emerged 3 riders in black cloaks, their hoods drawn, their mounts weary and frost-covered. For a heartbeat, he feared they were more wights, risen and unholy. But when one raised a hand in greeting, he saw the familiar crest of the Night's Watch stitched into the man's cloak. "By the gods," Joran breathed. The leader dismounted, a tall man with frost in his beard and a scar across his cheek. "Stark," he called. "Sir Joran Stark?" Joran nodded warily. "And who calls me?" "Ranger Redden Snow of Castle Black. We were sent to find what became of our brothers from the Shadow Tower." His eyes flicked over the ashes and the blood-streaked snow. "I reckon we've found our answer." Joran sheathed his sword. "You've found worse than that, Ranger. The dead are walking." Redden's expression hardened. "Aye," he said quietly. "We've seen them too. Thought the tales were old women's fears, but they're true enough. Something stirring beyond the wall. Something not seen since the long night." Joran felt a cold deeper than the wind settle in his bones. "Then the watch must be warned." "We ride at once," Redden said. "Castle Black is 3 days if the weather holds. You'll come with us?" "I will," Joran answered. "I'll not leave the wall unguarded while such things walk beneath it." They rode together through the endless white, their horses moving in slow, cautious steps. The wind carried with it the faint smell of smoke and iron. At night, they made small fires, ringed close around them, taking turns on watch while Greyfang prowled the perimeter. The second night, they camped near the frozen river called the White Knife's Source. The water there ran sluggish and black beneath a thin skin of ice. Redden sat beside Joran, sharpening his blade. "Your cousin, Lord Eddard," he said after a time. "He always kept to the old ways. I remember when he came to the wall with his sons. Said the North must never forget." Joran nodded, staring into the fire. He was right. Too many think the words, "winter is coming," are just a saying, a warning against hardship or hunger. But my father told me it was more than that. It meant the dark itself returned sooner or later. That men must always be ready. Reden's mouth twitched in a grim smile. Ready or not, it's upon us. Before Joran could reply, Greyfang stiffened. The direwolf's lips peeled back, teeth bared. Quiet, Joran hissed. He rose, hand to sword. From the far bank of the river came a faint light, a shimmer, pale and cold, like moonlight trapped in mist. It moved between the trees, silent and graceful, drawing nearer. The rangers rose as one. Torches, Reden barked. The light drew closer still, until Joran could see the figure that bore it. A man, tall and slender, clothed in rags of white, his flesh the color of frost, his eyes shining blue as a glacier's heart. A chill swept through Joran that had nothing to do with the wind. Others. Reden breathed. By the gods, the stories were true. The creature raised its arm, and the air itself seemed to freeze solid. Frost crept along the ground in jagged veins, racing toward them. Joran shouted for the men to fall back, but the creature moved with unnatural speed, gliding over the snow without sound. The rangers' torches flared, their flames sputtering blue before dying in the cold. Panic broke among the horses. One reared, screaming, and bolted into the trees. Joran charged forward, sword in hand. Steel met the creature's blade, a weapon of ice, gleaming with an inner light. The sound of the clash was like glass breaking. Reden and the others joined him, striking from all sides, but the creature flowed between them like water. Its movements were beautiful, terrible, perfect. One man fell, his throat opened. Another froze solid where he stood. Fire! Joran shouted. Light the fire! Greyfang lunged at the creature's legs, forcing it back. Joran seized a torch from the fallen and swung it wide. The flame hissed as it met the creature's blade, shattering it. With a cry, Joran drove the torch into its chest. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Then the creature let out a sound like cracking ice and burst apart, shards scattering into the snow. The light faded. The night was still again. 2 rangers lay dead. One moaned softly, his arm blackened with frostbite. Reden stared at the place where the creature had fallen. 7 save us all, he whispered. What manner of thing was that? Joran wiped the sweat and frost from his brow. A herald, he said grimly. A messenger from the long night that waits for us all. They buried the dead before dawn and rode hard for the wall. None spoke of what they had seen, for fear that to name it aloud would summon more. When, at last, the black stone of Castle Black rose before them through the mist, Joran felt a shudder of relief. But even as the gates creaked open, a part of him knew peace would not last. The wind carried a strange sound, faint and distant, yet unmistakable. The echo of horns, 3 long blasts, the signal of the others. And in that moment, Sir Joran Stark understood why his house had carried its words for 1,000 years. Winter is coming. It was not a warning of season nor hunger. It was prophecy. It was the truth of the world, that death waits patient as snow, and when it comes again, it comes for all. The wall rose before them at last, a sheer expanse of pale stone and frozen light, towering into a sky of cloud and frost. It was not merely a wall. It was the world's final boundary, vast and terrible in its stillness. The rangers and Sir Joran Stark approached through knee-deep snow, their horses spent and trembling, their cloaks rimed white. The Black brothers at the gate took one look at them and wordlessly began to haul open the great iron chains. When Joran passed beneath the shadow of the wall, it felt as though he were walking beneath the weight of eternity itself. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and damp wool. Men hurried to and fro, crows in black, carrying torches and buckets, tending to wounded brothers returned from ranging. The mutters that passed between them were low and fearful. Reddened snow led Joran straight to the Lord Commander's hall, a squat structure of dark wood and cold stone, where a fire burned fiercely in the great hearth. Inside waited Jeor Mormont, the old bear himself, hunched over a table strewn with maps. His great black bear of a shadow loomed large in the flickering light. When he looked up, his sharp eyes took in Joran's torn cloak, the frost burns on his cheeks, and the haunted look behind his gaze. "Sir Stark," the Lord Commander said, "we'd heard whispers of you. The Umbers sent word you were lost north of the Gift." "I should have been," Joran replied, voice hoarse. "Many better men were." Redden stepped forward and placed a small leather pouch upon the table. Mormont opened it and drew back with a curse. Inside was a shard of blue crystal, cold as death, glinting faintly even in the firelight. "One of them carried it," Redden said. "A sword, forged of this. It shattered when struck by flame." Mormont turned the shard in his thick fingers. Frost gathered along the edges of the table where it touched the wood. "Gods," he muttered. "So it's true." Joran nodded grimly. "The Dead Walk, Lord Commander. Whole villages have been taken. I've seen them myself. Men I knew, risen again in silence, eyes pale as winter skies." A murmur passed among the other officers gathered in the hall. Some made the sign of the seven. Others looked to the door as if expecting the cold to spill through. Mormont slammed his fist upon the table. "We've no time for fear. If the dead are truly stirring, the wall will be tested soon enough." He turned to Joran. "Your Stark blood. I'll send ravens to Winterfell. The North must be warned." But Joran shook his head. "The ravens won't be enough. The South will not believe tales of walking corpses. I'll ride myself. Ned Stark will listen." The old bear frowned. "The road is long and perilous. You'll be hunted by more than cold things." "Still," Joran said, "it must be done." Before dawn the next day, he was already on horseback, Grey Fang trotting beside him, the wall's vast shadow falling behind. The watchmen saluted as he passed, their faces pale in the early light. He rode hard for 3 days through the desolate wilds south of the wall, following the King's Road toward the lands of men. But the cold clung to him, and he could not shake the feeling that eyes watched from every snowbank and hollow. Once, at dusk, he saw movement along the tree line, a pale figure standing motionless, its shape blurred by mist. When he blinked, it was gone. By the 5th night, he reached the ruins of Queenscrown, a village long abandoned. He took shelter in the tower that overlooked the frozen lake. The fire he built hissed weakly, and Grey Fang lay with his head upon Joran's boot, ears flicking. Joran dreamed that night, a strange and terrible dream. He stood upon the wall again, but it was broken and crumbling, swallowed by snow. A figure cloaked in white approached him, face hidden, and in a voice like cracking ice it whispered, "Winter is not coming. It has always been here." When Joran woke, the fire had burned low, and the air was colder than before. Outside, the snow whispered softly. He rose and stepped to the window slit. The lake was still, the world quiet, until he saw it, a man standing upon the ice, motionless, head tilted back as if staring at the sky. Joran's breath caught. The figure was clad in black, the remains of a night's watch cloak fluttering faintly in the wind. Its skin gleamed white as marble, and its eyes burned pale blue. "7 hells," Joran murmured. "Redden?" The thing's mouth opened, soundless, and then it began to move. Grey Fang was already on his feet, growling deep in his throat. Joran seized his sword and kicked open the door. The cold hit him like a hammer. He charged down the slope toward the lake, boots crunching, heart pounding. But when he reached the shore, the ice was empty. Only wind and shadow remained. Then came the sound, a crack beneath his feet, faint but sharp. The ice groaned. From beneath it, a pale hand struck upward. Joran staggered back as the surface shattered. A corpse clawed its way out, followed by another and another, water freezing as it spilled. Men of the watch by their black rags. Dead men. He fought as they came at him, sword flashing, Grey Fang leaping and snarling. He cut through one, then another, but for every corpse that fell, another rose. The lake churned with death. With a shout, Joran swung wide and broke through their ranks, sprinting toward the tower. He slammed the door and barred it, panting, listening to the scratching outside. Grey Fang stood beside him, hackles raised, teeth bared. Joran seized his flint and torch, hands shaking. "Fire, boy," he whispered. "Only fire can hold them." He lit the thatch at the base of the tower, the flames climbing fast, licking at the old wood. The scratching grew louder, then frantic. The door shuddered once, twice, and then burst inward. The dead poured through, wreathed in smoke and flame. Joran swung until his arms burned, until the air filled with sparks and the smell of burning flesh. The tower groaned beneath the heat, timbers cracking. He seized Grey Fang and leapt through the smoke, landing hard in the snow. Behind him, the tower collapsed in a roar of fire and ash, the light bright enough to stain the night red. When the dawn came, the tower was nothing but embers. The dead were gone, or buried beneath ice. Joran sank to his knees, exhausted, staring at the rising sun. He felt something cold in his hand. The shard of ice sword he'd taken from Redden's pouch. He'd carried it still, though he did not remember why. Now it glimmered faintly, untouched by the fire. Grey Fang whimpered low, uneasy. Joran stared at the shard and felt the weight of his house words in his chest like stone. "Winter is coming," he whispered. "But it's not just snow, is it?" The shard's glow deepened, faint as breath in the cold, and from far to the north, across leagues of forest and frozen waste, a sound rose faintly on the wind, distant horns calling once more. 3 blasts, the dead were moving again, and Joran Stark rode south, toward Winterfell, carrying the cold upon his back like a curse. The road to Winterfell wound long and lonely through the north, a serpent of packed snow and frozen mud threading between ghostly woods. For days, Sir Joran Stark rode without rest, wrapped in silence and wind. His cloak was torn, his armor dulled with frost, and the strange shard of ice he carried pulsed faintly against his breast like a living thing. Grey Fang padded beside him, tireless and watchful, his silver coat blending with the snow. The direwolf's breath came in great steaming clouds, and every so often he would stop and stare back the way they had come, ears flat, growling low. Joran did not need to ask why. He could feel it too, the chill that followed them, unseen yet ever near. The cold had grown unnatural. It did not wax and wane with the sun, but clung to him like a living shadow. He passed through empty villages, their wells frozen, doors barred. Once, he saw smoke rising from a distant farmstead and rode to it, hoping for shelter. But when he reached the place, the fire was burning unattended, and the house was full of silence. No bodies, no footprints, only the faint scent of rot beneath the snow. That night, he dreamed again of the wall. He stood atop it alone, gazing north, and in the distance, a host of pale figures moved across the ice, thousands upon thousands, their eyes cold stars. He woke gasping, the shard in his hand burning with frost. By the time he reached the Wolf's Wood, his strength was nearly spent. He had not eaten properly in 2 days, and his horse was lathered with sweat despite the cold. The forest seemed to close in around him, its great black pines thick with hoarfrost, their branches heavy and silent. But then, through the tangle of snow and shadow, he saw it. Winterfell. The gray towers rose proud and steadfast from the heart of the forest, their smoke curling gently into the pale sky. The sight nearly broke him. He spurred his weary horse and rode hard for the gates. The guards cried out in astonishment as he approached, for none had expected his return. When they helped him down from the saddle, he nearly fell. "Take me to Lord Stark," he rasped. At once, the great hall of Winterfell was warm and full of light. Torches burned in the sconces, and the smell of roasted meat filled the air. At the high table sat Eddard Stark, solemn and still, his gray eyes sharp as steel. Lady Catelyn stood beside him, her face pale with concern as Joren stumbled forward and knelt before them. "Gods," Ned said, rising to his feet. "Joren, by the look of you, you've been through hell itself." Joren managed a grim smile. "Not hell, my lord. Something colder." The hall fell silent. Even the crackle of the fire seemed to fade. He told them everything then, the empty villages, the whites, the White Walker on the frozen river, the burning of the tower, the horns that sounded thrice. As he spoke, the faces around him grew pale and drawn. Bran and little Rickon watched from the shadows, wide-eyed, while Maester Luwin stood motionless, quill forgotten in his hand. When Joren finished, he drew forth the shard of ice and set it upon the table. The room seemed to grow colder at once. Frost gathered along the edge of the wood, and the flames in the hearth hissed as though choked by its presence. "This," Joren said softly, "was their weapon. No steel can match it. Only fire defeats it." Ned stared long at the shard, then at Joren. "And you're certain?" "I am. I've seen the dead walk, Ned. I've fought them." The Lord of Winterfell's jaw tightened. "Then winter truly comes." Lady Catelyn crossed herself. "The old tales," she whispered. "Children's stories." "They're no stories," Joren said. "They're warnings we forgot to heed." Ned turned to Maester Luwin. "Send ravens to White Harbor, the Dreadfort, Deepwood Motte. The bannermen must know, and one to the wall. Tell Mormont his message reached us." He looked back to Joren. "You've done your duty, cousin. Rest now. You're safe in Winterfell." But Joren shook his head. "Safe?" He laughed without mirth. "No place is safe, not now. They'll come south as they did before. When the cold deepens, nothing living will stand before them." Ned's gaze was steady, unflinching. "Then we'll stand anyway." That night, as snow drifted down over the battlements, Joren stood upon the ramparts, staring north. The stars were hidden, and a strange stillness lay over the land. Greyfang paced restlessly at his side, growling at the dark. "You sense it too, don't you, boy?" Joren murmured. "Something's moving out there." The direwolf lifted his head and gave a long, low howl that echoed across the keep. A figure stepped out from the shadows behind him. "My Lord Stark bids you rest," came the voice of Theon Greyjoy, young and sharp-eyed, his usual grin gone. "You look as if you've not slept in a moon's turn." "I've no time for sleep," Joren said. "There's a war coming that no sword or banner can win." Theon hesitated, then glanced north. "You truly believe it, don't you? The dead walking?" Joren met his gaze. "Believe? I've slain them with my own hand, and I'll see more before I die." Theon shifted uneasily. "Then let us pray your words are madness, cousin. For if they're true, the world's done for." He left, and the sound of his boots faded down the stair. Joran turned once more to the frozen expanse beyond the walls. The wind sighed through the pines, whispering in a voice that almost formed words. For an instant, he thought he saw a flicker of blue far to the north, a glimmer that vanished as quickly as it appeared. The shard at his belt gave a faint, cold pulse, as if answering a call. In the morning, the ravens would fly. Men would ready their blades and speak of honor and duty. But Joran Stark knew the truth. Their war had already begun. The cold was awake. And as he stood there beneath the gray northern sky, he understood the meaning of his house words more deeply than any Stark before him. Winter is coming was not a saying. It was a promise, a truth written into the bones of the world, that death has no end. Only patience the North had forgotten, but the North would remember. And when the first snows fell red with blood, they would all know what the words truly meant. The ravens took wing at dawn, black specks against a bruised gray sky. Their cries faded into the distance as they flew south, bearing Winterfell's warning. Yet Sir Joran Stark watched them go with little comfort. He knew ravens carried more than messages. They carried hope, and hope was a fragile thing when winter stirred in the bones of the world. 3 days passed, each colder than the last. The fires in the great hall burned from dawn till dusk, yet the chill crept deeper into the stones of Winterfell. Men whispered that even the hot springs below the castle were cooling. The glass gardens grew pale and brittle, their plants heavy with frost. Lord Eddard moved through the castle like a man burdened by ghosts. He spoke little, but his commands were swift. The walls reinforced, the food stores doubled, every sword sharpened. Still, none said aloud what all knew, that these preparations were as candles against a storm. On the 4th night, Joran dreamed again. He stood upon a plain of endless snow, a lone figure in the dark. Around him rose the dead, not men, but shadows wearing men's shapes. They moved soundlessly, their eyes burning cold, and above them loomed a crown of frost and stars. A voice whispered from the black sky, "The North remembers, but the South forgets." When he woke, the air in his chamber shimmered with frost. The shard of ice he had carried from the wall lay upon the table, glowing faintly blue. Greyfang whimpered, tail low, and the breath from his muzzle froze before it touched the ground. Joran took the shard in his gloved hand. The cold seared like iron from a forge, but he did not release it. "Show me," he murmured. "If there's more to come, show me." The light within the shard flickered once, twice, then flared. Images flashed across his mind. Men marching beneath the direwolf banner, a field of red snow, the wall burning with blue flame. He saw Bran, still a boy, standing before a heart tree that bled sap like tears. And beyond all that, darkness. He dropped the shard, gasping. Later that morning, he sought out Ned in the Godswood. The air there smelled of pine and cold water, and the red leaves of the heart tree stirred softly. Ned knelt beneath it, his sword laid across his knees. "You've seen something," Ned said before Joran could speak. Joran nodded. "I've seen war, one that steel cannot win. The White Walkers are gathering their strength. They move even now, driving the cold before them. The wall will not hold forever." Ned's gray eyes met his, calm yet heavy. "Then we do what we've always done. We endure." "That won't be enough this time," Joran said. "You must send for aid, south, even to the Iron Throne. Tell the king what's coming." "The king hears only what he wishes," Ned replied, "and he will not believe tales of old magic and frozen corpses. Robert has grown fat and careless." Joran's jaw tightened. "Then when the dead cross the neck, he'll believe. By then, it will be too late." A raven's cry broke the stillness above them. Ned rose, brushing snow from his knees. "Come," he said. "Meister Lewin has called us to the rookery. A bird from the wall." They climbed the tower together, the direwolf following at their heels. The chamber was dim, lit only by a single torch. Lewin stood beside the raven perch, a scrap of parchment trembling in his hand. "It's from Lord Commander Mormont," he said. "The shadow tower has fallen." The word struck like a hammer. "Fallen?" Ned repeated. "Burned," Lewin whispered. "The men fled south. The dead came in the night, thousands by the watch's count. The fires held them for a time, but not long." Joran felt the breath leave his lungs. "It's begun." Ned's expression hardened. "Then we stand ready." He left to summon his bannermen, and by dusk, Winterfell's courtyard thundered with activity. Men gathered beneath the snow, sharpening swords, mending armor, tying furs about their cloaks. The great horn of the north sounded once, a long, deep note that rolled across the frozen plains like the voice of the earth itself. House Umber, House Karstark, the Manderleys, all would answer the call. The North had not rallied so since the days of Torrhen Stark, the king who knelt. That night, Joran sat by the fire in his chambers, the shard of ice lying on the table before him. Its glow had dimmed, yet its presence filled the room like a second heartbeat. Greyfang raised his head suddenly, ears pricked toward the door. Before Joran could speak, it creaked open, and a young boy slipped inside. "Bran?" Joran said softly. The child stood barefoot, his eyes distant, his voice low. "They're coming." Joran rose. "You've seen it too?" Bran's gaze was far away, unfocused, as though he were looking through Joran rather than at him. "The trees remember," he whispered. "They whisper in the wind. The cold men walk again. The heart trees cry red tears for the living." Before Joran could answer, the boy blinked, and the strange calm left his face. "Uncle?" he asked, confused. "What's happening?" Joran knelt before him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Nothing you need fear, little wolf. Go back to your bed." But as the boy left, Joran's hands trembled. The gods were speaking through the Starks now. That much was clear. The blood of the first men still ran deep, and it remembered things older than any wall. He stared once more at the shard. Its glow pulsed faintly in rhythm with the beating of his heart. Then, without warning, it cracked. A single hairline fracture split its center, and from within came a whisper, thin and cold. "You cannot fight winter." The flame in the hearth flickered, guttered, and went out. The room plunged into darkness. Joran rose slowly, drawing his sword. Greyfang growled, the sound deep and trembling. The whisper came again, closer this time, threading through the walls like a draft of icy air. Then silence. The shard lay still, dark once more. He stood there long after, listening to the soft patter of snow against the window. Somewhere beyond Winterfell's walls, deep in the night, a horn sounded, a single mournful note that rolled across the land. Not the wall's horn this time. Closer, too close. Joran's blood turned to ice. He stepped to the window. Far across the fields, near the edge of the wolf's wood, a pale light flickered between the trees, cold and blue. He whispered the words again, almost to himself, the ancient vow of his house. Winter is coming. And for the first time since returning home, he feared it would come before the dawn. The horn's echo lingered long after its note had faded, a sound that seemed to crawl beneath the skin of Winterfell. The wind carried it through every corridor, every courtyard, a whisper that stirred old fears in the hearts of men. By dawn, the keep was awake. Guards rushed to the battlements, torches flickering against the gray snow. Sir Jorah Stark was already there, sword strapped across his back, frost caked in his hair. He stared north across the fields, where the first light of day bled weakly over the horizon. No birds sang, no smoke rose from the distant farms. The world held its breath. Then he saw them. At the edge of the Wolfswood, half shrouded by drifting snow, shadows moved, slow, deliberate, endless. Not men, not truly. The light of dawn touched them, and they did not flinch. Jorah's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "They're here," he whispered. The guards beside him peered into the gloom, their faces pale. "The dead," one breathed, voice trembling. "Sound the horns," Jorah commanded. "Wake the castle." Within moments, the great horn of Winterfell sounded thrice, deep and mournful, echoing across the frozen plains. The alarm spread through the keep like fire. Men poured from their chambers, pulling on armor, shouting orders, dragging barrels of oil and firewood to the walls. Lord Eddard appeared soon after, calm despite the storm in his eyes. "Report," he said simply. Jorah pointed north. "They march from the forest. Hundreds, maybe more. They'll reach the walls by midday." Ned's gaze followed the line of Jorah's finger. "Then Winterfell stands today, as it always has." He turned to his men. "To arms. Archers to the ramparts, pikes to the gates. Maester Lewin, light the signal fires. If the Umbers are within a day's ride, they'll come." The castle became a storm of movement. The clang of steel rang out, joined by the bark of commands and the distant howling of wolves. From the kennels came the direwolves' chorus, Greyfang among them, rising wild and fierce into the morning air. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, the dead had reached the fields. Jorah stood beside Ned upon the battlements, watching as the enemy drew near. They moved in silence, a mass of pale shapes that stretched across the snow. Once men, clad in rags and armor half-eaten by rust, their eyes burning with that same cold light. At their head rode a figure taller than the rest, draped in ice like glass. Its crown was a circlet of frost, its sword a shard of living crystal. A White Walker. Jorah felt his heart tighten. "They've come for what was lost," he murmured. Ned's voice was steady. "They'll find nothing here but fire and steel." He gave the order. Archers lined the walls, their arrows wrapped in oil-soaked cloth. When the first of the dead stepped within range, Ned raised his hand. "Loose!" A storm of flaming arrows darkened the sky. They fell among the ranks of the dead, bursting in showers of orange light. Many fell, burning, their flesh crackling. Yet the rest pressed on, step by relentless step. The ground shook as the gates were barred. Boiling pitch was poured from the murder holes, torches thrown down. The snow became mud, then steam, then ash. Still they came. "Gods," one guard whispered. "They don't stop." "Then we don't either," Jorah said. He drew his sword and turned to Ned. "I'll take a company and ride out. Cut down the vanguard before they reach the walls." Ned hesitated only a moment. "You won't make it back." "Then I'll die a Stark, sword in hand." Ned's hand closed over his arm. "You're my blood. I won't lose another." Jorah met his eyes. "You won't lose me, cousin. You'll remember me." Before Ned could stop him, Jorah swung into the saddle of his waiting horse. Greyfang bounded beside him, and 24 riders followed, their banners whipping in the cold wind. The gates opened just wide enough for them to pass, then shut behind them with a boom like thunder. They rode hard across the frozen field, the hooves of their horses throwing up clouds of snow. The dead turned as one, faces blank, eyes blazing. For Winterfell! Joran roared, and they crashed into the horde like fire through dry grass. Steel met bone, flame met ice. The living hacked and slashed, torches flaring in their offhands. For every wight they felled, 2 more rose from the snow, dragging themselves forward. Greyfang tore through them, jaws dripping blood and frost alike. Joran's sword found the neck of a dead man, cleaving it clean. He fought like a man possessed, shouting the words that had guided his house for generations. Winter is coming. Winter is coming. Then the air grew colder still. The White Walker had come. It moved among the dead with the grace of a ghost, its sword gleaming blue in the light of the sun. Every step it took froze the ground beneath it. Joran spurred his horse forward, meeting it head-on. The impact threw him from the saddle. He hit the snow hard, rolling to his feet, sword in hand. The walker raised its blade. Joran met it with steel, and the clash rang like shattering glass. The frost crept along his sword, numbing his arm. He fought with all the fury in him, but the creature was fast, faster than any man had right to be. It swung once more, and Joran's sword snapped in 2. He staggered back, breath ragged, eyes wide. The walker leveled its blade at his chest. Then Greyfang leapt, knocking the creature aside. They fell together into the snow, the direwolf snarling, the walker hissing in a voice like the cracking of ice. Joran seized the shard of crystal at his belt, the same he had taken from the wall, and drove it deep into the walker's throat. The creature screamed, light spilling from the wound. It shattered into shards that whirled away on the wind. The wights faltered, their movements slowing, then collapsed like puppets with their strings cut. Joran fell to his knees, gasping. The field was silent once more. His men, those still standing, stared in awe. "Back to the gates!" he shouted. "Back to Winterfell!" They turned and rode hard, dragging the wounded behind them. When they reached the walls, the men of Winterfell cheered, though their faces were pale. Ned met him at the gate, eyes full of grim relief. "You slew it?" "One," Joran said, dismounting. "There will be others." Ned's gaze flicked north, where the forest loomed dark and endless. "Aye, but not today." Joran looked down at the shard in his hand, now dull and lifeless. "Not today," he echoed softly. That night, the dead did not return. The fires of Winterfell burned high, their smoke rising black against the stars. Yet Joran could not sleep. He stood once more upon the walls, staring toward the horizon. The wind was quiet, but he could still hear the echo of the horn in his mind. Winter had come, and though the dawn would rise again, he knew the night had only just begun. Snow fell softly over Winterfell, shrouding the scars of battle in a clean white veil. Smoke still drifted from the fields where fire had scorched the dead. But within the castle walls, the living drew breath again. The air stank of burned flesh and pine tar, and yet the silence after so much death felt like a blessing. Sir Joran Stark stood upon the battlements, his cloak heavy with frost, his hands resting on the cold stone. Below him, the courtyard bustled with life, smiths mending blades, healers tending to the wounded, soldiers whispering tales of what they had seen. They spoke of the wights, of the White Walker's fall, and of Joran's stand in the snow. But their voices were hushed, and none dared call it victory. They all knew what Joran knew. This was no end, only a beginning. The shard he had used to slay the creature lay now upon the Maester's table, wrapped in furs. Even dead, it leached cold into the air, a frost that crept along the stone. Maester Luwin had tried to study it, but his ink froze in its pot and his candles sputtered to black smoke. "Such power is not meant for mortal hands," Luwin had whispered. "You should cast it into fire, Sir Joran." "I've tried," Joran answered. "The fire dies before it touches it." Now he stared north again, his breath rising in white plumes. Greyfang sat beside him, silent and watchful, eyes glinting in the dusk. The direwolf had a deep cut along his flank from the battle, but he bore it as if it were nothing. The gate below opened, and a group of riders entered the courtyard. At their head rode Great John Umber, broad as a bull and twice as loud, snow caked in his beard. He dismounted with a roar. "By the gods, I thought the tales were madness until I saw the bones myself," he shouted. "Frozen dead men, right enough. I burned one with my own torch, took 3 strikes to make it stay down." Lord Eddard descended the steps to meet him, calm as ever. "You came quickly, my friend." "When the Stark banners call, the Umbers answer," Great John said. "But tell me, Ned, what devilry is this we face?" "The oldest kind," Ned replied. "The kind that remembers what men forget." Joran joined them as they entered the great hall, the firelight gleaming on the direwolf sigils carved in the beams above. Lords and captains crowded the long tables, their faces drawn. The banners of the north hung heavy with soot. Ned took his seat at the high table, with Joran at his right hand. "You've all heard the stories," he began. "Now you've seen proof. The dead rise in the north. The White Walkers have returned." Murmurs rippled through the hall. "They're myths," protested one of the younger lords, pale with fear. "Old wives' tales to scare children." "Do old wives' tales burn your men alive?" Joran snapped. "Do they shatter steel with frost?" The hall fell silent again. Ned's voice carried steady as stone. "The wall cannot stand alone. The watch bleeds and freezes while the rest of Westeros drinks and feasts. That ends now. The north must be ready." Great John slammed his fist upon the table. "Then we ride by the gods. We'll meet these ice devils head on." "Steel won't save you," Joran said quietly. "Fire will. Dragon's fire, if we had it." The men muttered among themselves, and Ned looked to Luwin. "Send ravens south again, to White Harbor, to King's Landing, even to Dragonstone. Someone must listen." Luwin bowed and left the hall. When the council broke, Joran lingered by the fire. The warmth barely touched him anymore. The shard lay heavy in his thoughts, whispering at the edge of hearing. Sometimes, when the hall was quiet, he could almost make out words, an echo of something ancient, something patient. That night, the whisper returned in his dreams. He was standing in the crypts beneath Winterfell, where the stone kings of House Stark slept. The torches burned blue instead of gold, and their flames did not flicker. He walked between the statues, each one carved with the likeness of a lord long dead. Their stone wolves stared with hollow eyes. At the end of the hall stood one statue unmarked by time. Its face was his own. A cold wind stirred the torches, and a voice came from the darkness. "Blood of the first men, bound to the cold. The North remembers, and so do we." "Who are you?" he demanded. "The forgotten kings," the voice answered. "The ones who bent the knee to the winter long before your walls were raised. The blood in your veins once served the cold, not the flame." Joran drew his sword, but the sound that left his lips was not a shout. It was a breath, white and frozen. Ice crept up the blade, up his arm. "Winter is coming," the voice whispered. "It comes for you first." He woke with a cry, his breath steaming in the dark. The shard glowed on the table beside him, brighter than ever. Frost spread from it across the wood, forming veins that pulsed faintly like living roots. Greyfang snarled, fur bristling. Joran snatched the shard and wrapped it tight in cloth, his hand burning from the cold. He stormed through the corridors, ignoring the startled looks of servants, until he reached the godswood. The heart tree waited, its red leaves stirring though there was no wind. Its white bark glowed faintly in the moonlight, the carved face weeping red sap. Jorn threw the shard at its roots. "Take it!" he shouted. "Whatever curse lies in it, take it back!" The air around him shivered. The sap ran thicker, streaking the tree's face like tears of blood. Then the ground split, just enough to swallow the shard whole. The light vanished. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then the whisper came again, so faint he could scarcely tell if it was real. The North remembers. The night passed without dreams. When dawn came, Jorn stood once more upon the walls beside Ned. The cold had lifted slightly, though clouds gathered far to the north. "Do you think they'll come again soon?" Ned asked quietly. "Yes," Jorn said, "but not until they've gathered their strength." He looked toward the godswood, where the heart tree swayed gently in the wind. "And when they do," he added, "they'll come for Winterfell first." Ned nodded. "Then we'll be ready." But Jorn was not so sure. For the first time in his life, he felt the blood of his ancestors stir like something old and restless. The dream had not been just a dream. Something beneath the earth of Winterfell had woken, and as he turned away, he thought he saw frost creeping up the trunk of the heart tree, thin as breath, but spreading all the same. The war between ice and fire had begun. The days that followed were hushed and brittle, as though the very air of Winterfell held its breath. Snow drifted down without wind, laying soft over the battlements, the trees, the graves of the fallen. The sky remained iron gray, without sun or moon. Lord Eddard Stark ruled with calm precision, but fear had taken root even in Winterfell's thick stone heart. Men avoided the godswood, where the frost on the heart tree never melted, and some whispered that they heard faint sounds beneath the earth at night. A slow, steady pulsing, like the beat of a slumbering giant's heart. Sir Jorah Stark spent his hours at the forge and the walls, training men, seeing to weapons, keeping his hands busy. But sleep brought no rest. The dreams came every night now. He stood again and again in the crypts beneath the castle, among his dead forebears, while the whispering voice spoke of debts long owed. The North remembers. The cold remembers. He did not tell Lord Eddard, for Ned bore enough burdens already. But the fear gnawed at him, that in casting the shard of ice into the roots of the heart tree, he had awakened something that was meant to remain buried. On the 7th day after the battle, a rider came from the south, half dead and rimed with frost. His horse collapsed before the gates, and when they pulled the man down, his fingers were black with cold. He bore the seal of White Harbor. Maester Luwin broke it and read aloud in the great hall, his voice thin with dread. "The harbor freezes," he said. "The sea itself ices over. Ships trapped in the bay are locked fast. The dead rise in the fisher villages along the coast. The Manderleys burn their own dead now." A silence fell heavy across the hall. Eddard rose, the light of the hearth casting long shadows across his face. "If the sea freezes, the others are moving faster than we thought. The wall must be pressed from both sides." Jorah's voice was rough. "The cold spreads. The land itself turns against us. The godswood burns in my dreams, cousin, its roots twisting through the crypts like veins of ice. There's something beneath us." Ned frowned. "Speak plainly." Jorah hesitated, then told him all. The dream of the Whispering Kings, the voice from the heart tree, the shard he had buried in its roots. The hall grew stiller with each word. Maester Luwin paled. You did what? Gods, Joran, do you know what power you've placed in the soil of Winterfell? That thing was not meant to rest here. Then where? Joran asked bitterly. No fire would take it. No hammer could break it. If the gods' wood is sacred, let the gods keep it safe. The old gods are not walls, Lewin said softly. They listen, but they do not protect. You may have given them a gift they never desired. Eddard's gaze hardened. What's done is done. If the shard lies buried, it lies with our ancestors. They'll guard it as they guarded the north before us. He turned to the men gathered there. We strengthen the walls, double the watch, and send for every bannerman who still breathes. Winterfell stands. The lords shouted their assent, but the fire in their eyes was forced. Each man knew that walls could not stop the cold. That night, the wind returned. It rose with a low moan, whirling through the courtyards, tearing at banners and shutters. Joran lay awake, listening as it swept down from the north, carrying with it a smell like old earth and iron. Then came the horn, one long blast from the watchtower. He was out of bed before the sound had faded, Greyfang racing at his side. The courtyard erupted in shouts. Men poured from the barracks, half-dressed, clutching spears. From the ramparts came another horn, shorter, sharper. Joran took the stairs 3 at a time. When he reached the top, he saw them. Beyond the fields, past the frozen moat and the half-buried trees, a storm moved. No ordinary snowstorm, but a wall of white mist that glowed faintly blue from within. It rolled toward them with the steady crawl of doom. "Light the fires," he shouted. "All of them! Wake the castle!" Torches flared to life along the walls. Archers took position. The heat from the braziers fought the wind, but could not chase it back. From the mist came movement. Tall shapes, gliding forward with dreadful grace. Their armor shimmered like crystal, their eyes twin shards of winter sky, white walkers. And behind them came the dead. The gates of Winterfell groaned under the weight of their assault. The living fought with fire-tipped spears and arrows, shouting hoarse above the shrieking wind. Oil poured from the battlements, igniting the snow in rivers of flame. Joran was everywhere at once, on the walls, on the stairs, in the yard, blade flashing. He cut down the dead as they climbed, but they rose again, unfazed by wounds that would fell any man. Greyfang tore through them, his muzzle black with ash. Then, amid the chaos, a scream tore through the din, a cry from the direction of the godswood. Joran froze. He knew that voice. It was Bran. Without thought, he ran. Through smoke and snow, down the stone paths toward the heart tree. The air grew colder with each step until his breath froze solid before his lips. The godswood glowed blue. Frost coated every branch, every leaf. The heart tree stood at the center, its red eyes wide, its tears frozen. And before it knelt, Bran Stark, his small hands pressed against the roots. The boy's eyes were open, but filled with light, not his own, but something vast and ancient. "Bran!" Joran shouted, racing forward. The ground shuddered. A crack split the frozen pool beside the tree, spreading like lightning. From it rose a pale figure, crowned with ice. Not a white, something older, stronger. Joran drew his sword, but the thing's gaze rooted him where he stood. Its voice came like the groaning of glaciers. "You woke us, Stark of Winterfell. You called the old kings from their sleep." "I called nothing," Joran shouted. "I buried the shard to end its curse." The creature tilted its head. "To end? You have no ending. You are bound to us by blood and by word. The North remembers because we remember. Your walls were built on our bones." Bran turned toward him, his voice no longer a child's. Winter is coming, he said, the words hollow, endless, and it does not come from the north alone. The ice cracked wider, and cold mist poured forth, swirling around the roots of the tree. Faces formed within it, ancient, half-frozen, whispering in tongues older than men. Joran charged. His sword blazed briefly as it struck the creature's arm, but the steel shattered like glass. A surge of pain shot through his body, and the world went white. When his vision cleared, the godswood was still. The mist had vanished. Bran lay unconscious beside the tree. The heart tree's roots had closed over the crack, sealing it once more. Joran knelt, gathering the boy into his arms. Bran breathed, though faintly. Above them, the first light of dawn touched the frozen branches, turning them to silver. Winterfell still stood, but beneath its stones, something ancient had stirred and waited. And Ser Jorah Stark, blood of the first men, son of the cold north, felt in his bones that this was only the beginning. He looked once more at the heart tree and whispered, half prayer, half curse, "Winter has come." The dawn that followed was brittle and cold. The fires along Winterfell's walls burned low, their smoke trailing like ghostly fingers into a colorless sky. The air tasted of ash and iron. Ser Jorah Stark walked the ramparts in silence, his cloak torn, his breath steaming. The battle had ceased at last, leaving only corpses and frozen blood scattered across the fields. Ravens circled overhead, their cries thin in the still air. The world, for the moment, was quiet again, but it was not peace. He stopped at the eastern tower where the view stretched far across the white expanse. The forest was gone, stripped by frost and fire. The snow beyond the moat was marred with blackened streaks where the dead had burned. Yet the mist had retreated, rolling back toward the north as though gathering strength for another strike. Ned joined him there, weary and grim. The Lord of Winterfell's eyes were red with lack of sleep, his jaw tight. "They're gone," he said, though his tone carried no relief. "For now. They'll come again," Joran answered. "Aye," Ned said quietly. "And when they do, we'll be waiting." He looked out across the smoldering plain. "It's begun, hasn't it?" "It has," Joran said. "And it won't end until the world itself remembers what it's forgotten." Ned's gaze shifted to the godswood below, where the heart tree's red leaves shivered in a wind that touched nothing else. "You should have told me sooner about what happened there," he said at last. "I feared what it might mean." "And now?" Joran hesitated. "Now I fear what will come of it." They fell silent. From below came the faint ring of hammers and saws as the blacksmiths and builders began to mend what could be mended. The castle had survived, but only barely. Half of the north wall had cracked beneath the frost's assault, and dozens of men had frozen where they stood. When they descended to the courtyard, Greatjon Umber was shouting orders, his deep voice booming like thunder. "More oil for the torches! If it burns, I want it stacked and ready. We'll turn the whole goddamn north into a pyre before we let them take it." Ned clasped his arm. "You fought well, Greatjon." The big man snorted. "Aye, but I'll take no pride in fighting corpses. Give me foes that bleed. These devils don't know the meaning of death." Joran passed them both and went to the stables. Greyfang waited there, pacing restlessly, his fur streaked with soot. The direwolf greeted him with a low growl that softened into a rumbling purr as Joran knelt to scratch his ears. "We lived through the night, old friend," he murmured. "That'll have to be enough." The beast's eyes flicked toward the godswood. Joran followed his gaze. Frost clung to the leaves like a second skin, glittering faintly even in the weak morning light. The heart tree seemed to watch him, its red eyes unblinking. That afternoon, Meister Lewin came to him in the great hall, clutching a scroll sealed with black wax. "From Castle Black," he said. "The old bear writes in haste." Jorn broke the seal and read. The ink was smeared in places, as if written by a trembling hand. The wall stands, but just barely. Eastwatch lost half its men. Wildlings flee south in thousands. Something drives them. They say the Frostfangs glow blue by night. The dead move in the forest. Send word to every holdfast. Send fire. He folded the letter slowly. Lewin's face was drawn. "There's more. Speak it. A raven from the south. King's Landing answers none of our messages. The last bird we sent never returned." "Then we are alone," Jorn said softly. The master's eyes dropped. "The North has always stood alone." True enough, Jorn thought. But never like this. That evening, they gathered again in council. Ned, Joran, Lewin, Greatjon, and the younger lords who yet lived. The fires in the hall burned bright, but the cold pressed in all the same. Ned spoke first. "The wall cannot hold forever. The watch bleeds faster than it can heal. We must prepare for the North to fall back. Defensible keeps, food stores, places for the small folk to shelter." Greatjon slammed a fist against the table. "Fall back? I'll be thrice damned before I yield an inch of the North to walking corpses." Ned's gaze was iron. "You'll yield ground, or you'll lose everything. We cannot win a war of numbers against death itself." Silence followed. The only sound was the crackle of the flames. Then Joran spoke. "There is one thing that might turn the tide. Fire alone kills them, but not just any fire. There are legends of dragon fire, of stone that burns, of the children of the forest who forged weapons from the heart of the world. If even a breath of those tales is true, we need to find it." Lewin frowned. "You speak of obsidian, dragon glass. It is rare, almost forgotten." "Then we'll find what remains," Joran said. "I'll ride north to the old ruins beyond the wall. There are caves where the first men once forged their blades. If the gods still favor the living, there will be something there worth the finding." Ned's jaw clenched. "You won't survive alone." "I'll take riders enough to slow me down," Joran said with a grim smile. "And the wolf. That's all I'll need." Ned's hand fell heavy on his shoulder. "You carry the blood of Winterfell. Don't squander it." "The blood of Winterfell was never meant to rest," Joran replied. "We're built for the cold." He left the next morning, before the sun had cleared the trees. A small company rode with him. 6 men, chosen for courage, not rank. Greyfang loped ahead, his paws leaving deep prints in the snow. They crossed the frozen lands north of the Barrowlands, where no bird flew and the rivers lay still as glass. The cold deepened with each mile, until even their breath turned to ice. At dusk, they camped beneath an outcropping of stone. Joran sat by the fire, staring into the flames, listening to the wind whisper across the waste. One of the riders, a lean man named Cregan, spoke softly. "You think there's truly fire buried in this frozen world, sir?" "There has to be," Joran said. "The world keeps balance. For every shadow, a flame. For every winter, a summer waiting to be born." He fed another branch to the fire. It crackled, sparks rising into the night. But as the warmth flickered, the wind changed, turning colder, sharper. Greyfang lifted his head and growled. From the darkness beyond, the firelight came a faint, rhythmic sound, the crunch of footsteps in the snow. Joran rose slowly, hand to sword. The others followed, forming a half circle around the flames. Out of the blackness stepped a lone figure, hooded, cloaked, face hidden beneath frost. It moved like a man, yet the air around it froze the fire where it passed. "Who goes there?" Joran called. The figure stopped, lowering its hood. A woman's face stared back, pale as snow, eyes gray as storm clouds. Her hair was white, her cloak stitched with feathers. "Sir Joran Stark," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried like wind across ice. "You seek fire in the land of frost. You'll find both, but not as you expect." Joran's grip tightened on his sword. "Who are you?" "Someone who remembers," she said, "and someone who owes your blood a debt." Greyfang snarled, but she did not flinch. She raised one hand, and in her palm lay a stone black as night, veined faintly with red light, obsidian, shaped like a dagger's blade. "Take this," she said. "It was forged in the fire beneath the world when the first men were still children. It is the only fire that endures the cold." Joran stepped forward. "Why give this to me?" "Because the winter that comes is older than your wall or your gods. When it breaks, you'll need more than fire to stand against it. You'll need memory." And before he could speak again, she was gone, vanished into the snow, as if the storm itself had swallowed her. Joran stood there long after, the black blade heavy in his hand, the cold wind whispering through the night. He felt the weight of his house's words settle upon him again, colder and truer than ever before. Winter is coming, and this time it would not stop at the wall. The wind rose with dawn, sharp as a knife's edge. Joran Stark rode north through a land that no longer seemed part of the world of men. The snow lay deep as gravecloth, and the air was so cold it cracked the skin upon his face. His men followed in silence, their breath ghosts before them, their eyes fixed always upon the endless white ahead. The black dagger lay at his belt, wrapped in fur to dull its bitter chill. When he touched it, even through the wrappings, he could feel its heartbeat, slow, steady, like the pulse of the earth itself. He had not told the others about the woman in the storm. Some things were better left unspoken, especially when they reeked of old powers. By the third day, the forests had thinned to twisted birch and frost-bitten pine. The wall was a distant shadow behind them now, and before them stretched the haunted forest in all its terrible quiet. They rode beneath boughs heavy with snow, the sound of hooves muffled, the world turned still and watchful. At dusk, they reached the remnants of an old fort, stone half-buried, the remains of a keep so ancient that even the wildlings feared to linger there. The air within its broken walls felt heavier, as if time itself had gone to sleep beneath the drifts. "We'll camp here," Joran said. The men moved without argument, too cold for talk. They built a small fire in the shadow of a crumbling wall, and Greyfang lay at Joran's side, his eyes reflecting the firelight like silver moons. Cregan, ever the boldest, broke the silence. "Do you think this blade can truly stop what's coming?" he asked, nodding toward the fur-wrapped dagger. "It's more than steel," Joran said. "The woman who gave it to me, she called it fire-made stone. I think it was forged before men learned to forge anything at all." "Sounds cursed," muttered another. "Everything north of the wall is cursed," Cregan replied with a half-hearted grin. But his jest fell flat. The men's laughter had died with the sun. That night, Joran dreamed again. He stood upon a frozen plain where the snow fell in spirals, each flake gleaming like glass. The air was alive with whispers, the voices of 1,000 unseen watchers. Before him stood a figure cloaked in black feathers, her face the same as the woman's who had met him in the snow. Her eyes burned like coals in the pale mask of her face. "You carry the seed of fire," she said, "but fire alone will not save you. The night is older than flame, older than the gods. Remember that, Stark of Winterfell. Then what must I do? Remember who you are, she said, and remember who sleeps beneath your home. He woke with frost crusting his beard, his body slick with sweat despite the cold. Grey Fang whined low in his throat. Beyond the firelight, the woods were utterly still. When morning came, one of the horses was gone. No tracks led away, only a hollow in the snow and a faint smear of black frost, as if the beast had simply melted into the ground. The men muttered oaths, crossing themselves. Joran said nothing. By midday, they reached the mouth of a narrow valley, flanked by cliffs that rose sheer and dark. Within, the air shimmered faintly, though no sun shone there. The old maps named this place the Vale of Shadows, where the first men had made sacrifice to their gods before the wall was raised. At its center lay a mound of stone, part cairn, part altar. Runes carved into the rock glimmered faintly through the frost. The place felt older than words. "This is it," Joran said. "Dig." They worked through the afternoon, shoveling snow and ice until the stones were laid bare. Beneath them, half buried in the permafrost, was a pit lined with obsidian shards, black glass catching what little light remained. "So much of it," whispered Cregan. "Enough to arm half the north." "Take what you can carry," Joran ordered. "The rest we mark and leave. The Umbers and Karstarks can mine it later." They filled their saddlebags until the leather strained. When at last the work was done, Joran knelt beside the mound and pressed a hand to the earth. "Old gods," he murmured, "if you still watch your children, bless this fire that was born of your cold." The wind answered with a low moan. Then came the sound, a faint, rhythmic crunch, like 100 boots treading snow. The men froze. Grey Fang growled, his hackles rising. "Mount up," Joran whispered. "Now." Out of the northern pass they came, figures pale as moonlight, armor shimmering like hoarfrost. The White Walkers. There were more than before, dozens at least, their swords of ice glinting blue. Behind them came the dead, a sea of hollow faces, eyes burning with that terrible light. "Ride!" Joran shouted. The company fled down the valley, snow spraying beneath their horses' hooves. The wind screamed through the pass, carrying the sound of the dead with it. Arrows of frost shattered against the stones as they rode, cold enough to pierce through mail and bone alike. Cregan turned in his saddle, loosing a torch at the nearest white. Fire caught upon its rags, spreading fast, but the creature did not fall. It burned and kept coming, its face splitting in a grin that was not human. Joran spurred his horse harder. Ahead, the valley forked, one path leading east toward the Ghost Hills, the other south toward the wall. "South!" he bellowed. "For the wall!" They thundered down the slope, the enemy close behind. One of his men fell, dragged screaming into the snow. Another's horse stumbled and broke its leg, throwing him beneath the oncoming tide. Joran looked back once and saw the lead walker raise its hand. Ice rippled across the ground, racing toward them like lightning. He drew the black dagger and slashed downward. Fire leapt from the blade, red and gold, searing the frost in its path. The ice shattered with a sound like glass breaking. The dead recoiled, shrieking, and for a moment, the world blazed with heat. Joran's horse stumbled to its knees. He rolled free, landing hard. The dagger flew from his grip, vanishing into the snow. He rose, dizzy, to see the walkers pause at the edge of the flames. The heat held them back, but not for long. He turned south again. "Ride!" he shouted. "Ride, damn you!" Cregan and the last few men obeyed, galloping into the white horizon. Joran followed, Grey Fang beside him. Behind them, the fire died as quickly as it had been born, swallowed by the cold. By nightfall, They reached the ruins of an old watchtower, stones black with age, its roof long gone. The horses collapsed in exhaustion. Only 3 men remained besides Joran. They built no fire. Even the sparks refused to live. The stars above were hidden, and the cold pressed down like a weight. Cregan broke the silence at last. "What now, sir?" "Now?" Joran looked north. The mist there glowed faintly, like the heart of a dying ember. "Now we take what we've found back to Winterfell. The North must see what hope remains to it." He did not tell them how close they had come to dying, nor did he speak of the voice he had heard as he fled, the same whisper that haunted his dreams. "Remember who sleeps beneath your home." As the night deepened, the snow fell thicker, blanketing the dead and living alike. Joran lay awake beside Greyfang, one hand on the hilt of his sword. In the distance, faint but certain, came the echo of horns. 3 blasts, carried by the wind. He closed his eyes, heart steady as the blade at his side. "Winter is coming," he whispered, and for the first time, the words did not feel like warning. They felt like prophecy fulfilled. The wind keened across the desolate wilds, a song of grief for the dying world. Sir Jorah Stark and his few surviving companions pressed on through the darkness, each mile harder than the last. The storm had followed them south, swallowing sky and earth alike. Snow fell thick as ash, and the air itself seemed alive with cold. Cregan rode at Jorah's side, his face pale beneath a crust of frost. "We're near the wall," he said, though his voice was rough and doubtful. "By tomorrow, we'll see its shadow." "If tomorrow comes," Jorah replied. Greyfang trotted ahead, muzzle low to the ground, a wraith of silver against the white. The direwolf's breath rose in clouds that froze before drifting away. Even the beast seemed uneasy, glancing often toward the dark horizon behind them. They did not stop that night. The world had turned too still. No bird, no sound, no life, only the crunch of hooves and the whisper of the wind. It felt as if they rode not through a land of the living, but through some frozen afterworld. At dawn, a faint shape appeared through the veil of snow. The wall, vast and pale as a mountain forged of light. Relief shuddered through the company. But as they drew nearer, Jorah's hope withered. Smoke rose from Castle Black. The closer they came, the thicker the smoke grew, carrying with it the stench of burned flesh. The gates hung broken. No ravens circled above. "Gods," Cregan murmured. "What happened here?" Jorah dismounted and entered the courtyard on foot. The bodies of Night's Watch brothers lay strewn in the snow, their black cloaks stiff with frost. Some bore wounds from swords, others from fire. Yet none of them moved. Not even the dead rose here. Something had scoured this place clean. They found Lord Commander Mormont near the base of the wall, slumped against the ice. His hand was frozen to the hilt of his sword, his eyes open, staring into a sky that no longer answered prayers. Jorah knelt, bowing his head. "You held as long as you could, old bear. The North owes you its breath." Greyfang whined softly, his nose brushing the frozen ground. Cregan looked around the ruined yard. If the wall falls, what stands between them and Winterfell? Jorah rose, his expression carved from stone. Nothing, nothing but us. They searched the ruins for supplies and found little. Some dried meat, a few unbroken casks of oil. In the Lord Commander's quarters, Jorah discovered a map, its edges scorched. Across it, written in Mormont's hand, were the final words he would ever pen. "They come from beneath." Jorah traced the letters with a gloved finger. Beneath. The words stirred the unease he had felt since leaving Winterfell. Beneath the wall, beneath the heart tree. beneath the north itself. When night fell, they made camp in the shadow of the great ice. The others slept in fits, muttering in their dreams. Joran sat awake beside the dying fire, staring up at the wall's smooth, glimmering face. In the distance, he thought he saw faint light within the ice, blue veins that pulsed like living blood. He rose, drawn toward it. The closer he came, the clearer the shapes became. Figures half trapped in the ice, faces twisted, eyes open. The wall was not a wall at all, he realized, but a prison, a veil that held back what men were never meant to see. The ice shifted. A low groan rolled through the ground. Snow fell from the heights in a glittering avalanche. Joran stumbled back, heart hammering. The pulse within the ice flared brighter, a blinding blue glow that rippled upward. "Joran!" Cregan's voice cut through the wind. Then came the sound that froze the blood in his veins. A horn's long, low blast, deep as thunder. Once, twice, thrice, from beyond the wall. The fire went out. "Mount up!" Joran shouted. "Ride for Winterfell!" They galloped into the storm, the ground trembling beneath their horses. Behind them, cracks spidered through the wall's surface, light seeping from every fissure. The sound of breaking ice filled the air. Endless, deafening, terrible. When Joran looked back, a column of blue flame erupted skyward, piercing the clouds. The wall was breaking. They rode for 2 days without rest. The cold grew unnatural, alive. It clawed at their flesh, whispered in their ears. By the second night, one of the riders was gone. By the third, another froze solid in his saddle, eyes open, lips blue. Only Joran, Cregan, and Greyfang remained when the black shape of the Wolfswood appeared on the horizon. At last, they saw the towers of Winterfell through the swirling snow. Fires burned upon the walls, the last bastion of warmth in a dying world. As they crossed the drawbridge, men rushed to meet them. Ned himself stood at the gate, his cloak billowing in the wind. "Joran!" he cried. "We thought you dead." "Not dead," Joran said hoarsely, sliding from his horse. "But the wall is. The others broke through. They're coming, by the thousands." The color drained from Ned's face. How long? Days, perhaps less. Word spread fast. The horns of Winterfell sounded again, summoning every soul to arms. The great fires were stoked higher, the walls lined with archers. But in their hearts, every man knew the truth. Winterfell was not built to withstand this war. That night, as the castle prepared for siege, Joran stood alone in the Godswood. The heart tree glowed faintly in the torchlight. Its red leaves rhymed with frost. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" he whispered. "All of you, sleeping beneath these stones." The wind rustled the branches, and for a heartbeat he thought he heard a whisper in reply. Soft, ancient, familiar. "You woke us too soon." He knelt, resting his hand on the frozen roots. "Then help me stop them. Let the North stand one last time." The frost deepened beneath his palm. The tree's carved face seemed to shift, the mouth opening in a silent scream. The ground trembled. And then came light, rising from the roots, white and pure, wrapping around him like flame. It burned without heat, seeping into his flesh, his blood. He gasped as the cold within him vanished, replaced by something vast and old. When he rose, the light faded, but it lingered in his eyes, faint as starlight. He turned toward the walls where the horns sounded again. Greyfang howled beside him. The dead had come to Winterfell. And as the gates thundered shut, Sir Joran Stark, last scion of the old blood, drew the black dagger from his belt. The stone pulsed once, red as heartfire. "Winter is here," he murmured. And when the first of the dead broke through the mist, he met them head on, fire in his hand, and the ghosts of the north at his back. The storm that fell upon Winterfell was like none the north had ever seen. Snow came sideways in the wind, hard as gravel, scouring the towers until their stones screamed. The sky turned black, the moon vanished, and the air itself burned with cold so deep it bit through mail and bone. The dead came with the storm. They rose out of the blizzard, countless shapes moving as one, silent save for the creak of ice in their joints. Eyes like pale fire cut through the darkness. The White Walkers marched behind them, tall as kings, their blades shimmering blue. Upon the battlements, Jorun Stark stood waiting, wrapped in his furs and steel. His breath rose in slow, steady plumes, and in his hand he held the black dagger of obsidian. It pulsed faintly, red as Emberheart. Beside him, Greyfang prowled the wall, hackles raised, muzzle white with frost. Below, Ned Stark rode along the line of men, his voice calm but strong as iron. "Hold your ground," he called. "Remember your oaths. You are the North. You are Winterfell." Torches blazed along the walls, and the great pyres in the yard were lit, mountains of wood and pitch, their flames roaring upward to defy the cold. The snow melted where it touched them, but the storm pressed harder, as if the wind itself sought to snuff out the light. Jorun drew a deep breath. Here they come. The first wave struck the gates with the force of thunder. The sound was a roar of splintering wood, clashing steel, and inhuman shrieks. The archers loosed, their flaming arrows streaking like falling stars. The dead caught fire, fell, and rose again, burning as they climbed. "Oil!" shouted the captain at Jorun's side. "Now!" The cauldrons tipped. Liquid flame poured down the walls, washing over the whites. Their flesh blackened and split, but still they climbed, clawing their way upward through the fire. Jorun swung down from the battlement, landing in the courtyard just as the gates burst inward. The dead poured through like a flood. He met them with his sword in one hand and the dagger in the other, striking left and right, each blow cracking bone and spilling sparks. Greyfang tore into them, a whirlwind of fur and teeth. Men screamed and died all around him. The smell of blood and smoke filled his lungs. Still he fought, carving a path through the tide. The obsidian blade burned wherever it struck, cutting through the cold like a living flame. A riderless horse crashed through the melee, half its face gone, its rider still clinging to the saddle, impaled on his own spear. The dead knight twisted his head toward Jorun, eyes blue as the wall itself. He charged. Jorun met him head on. Their swords clashed, ringing like chimes of ice. The creature's strength was inhuman, forcing Jorun back step by step. Then Greyfang leapt, knocking the corpse aside. Jorun drove the black blade deep into its chest. The white shuddered, light spilling from its mouth, then collapsed in a heap of ash and snow, but there was no end to them. For every one that fell, 10 more took its place. On the wall, the horns of Winterfell cried again, long, mournful notes that bled into the storm. The dead had scaled the northern parapets. Jorun looked up and saw a White Walker among them, tall and crowned with frost, its sword gleaming like moonlight on still water. He could feel its gaze upon him, ancient, cold, endless. He ran, through the courtyard, up the stair, into the heart of the storm. The wind howled around him, tearing at his cloak. When he reached the top of the wall, the walker was waiting. "You should have stayed buried, Stark," it said in a voice like cracking ice. "The old blood serves us still." Jorun's grip tightened on the dagger. "You'll find no servants here." The creature moved, swift as thought. Its blade struck like lightning. Joran parried once, twice, the impacts numbing his arm. Sparks of frost danced in the air. Then he saw an opening and drove the obsidian dagger forward. It struck true. The walker screamed, a sound that split the sky. Blue light flared from the wound, blinding in its brightness. The ice beneath their feet cracked. With a final shuddering cry, the creature exploded into shards, scattering into the storm. The light faded. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the whites below faltered, their movements sluggish. Some collapsed altogether, bodies crumbling to snow. A cheer rose from the men on the walls, faint and ragged but alive. But Joran knew it was not victory. From the distance came a deeper sound, a rumble that shook the stones. The storm shifted, the clouds tearing open to reveal a vast, pulsing light far to the north. It moved like a living thing, spreading across the horizon. The earth trembled. A wave of cold, unlike any before, rolled through the air, extinguishing half the fires at once. Ned appeared beside him, breath steaming. "What is it?" "The heart of winter," Joran said softly. "It's coming for us." Below, the dead that had fallen began to rise again, not one by one, but all at once. The ash and ice of the fallen White Walker swirled into the wind, coalescing into shapes unseen. Joran felt the ground vibrate beneath his boots. The frost spread up the walls like living veins. "Back!" he shouted. "Fall to the inner yard." They retreated to the heart of the keep, where the last great pyre burned beside the old weirwood. The heart tree's red leaves flared in the light, the carved face gleaming with wet sap that looked too much like blood. Joran turned to Ned. "The fire won't hold them long. The wall is gone. The old gods must stand for us now, or all is lost." Ned stared at him, the fire's reflection dancing in his eyes. "If we fall here, Winterfell dies, the North dies. Then we give it our all." Joran stepped forward, placing the dagger at the foot of the tree. "You wanted to remember," he whispered. "Then remember now. Remember what it means to stand against the dark." He pressed his hand to the roots. The ground answered with a tremor that shook the very air. The sap upon the tree's face began to run faster, glowing faintly red. The storm screamed overhead. The pyre roared higher, flames leaping toward the sky. The obsidian dagger blazed, its light spreading across the yard. The frost retreated just for an instant. Then came the horn again, 3 long blasts. The sound of the dead closing in. Ned drew his sword. "Starks of Winterfell," he shouted. "Hold the line." The men raised their blades, voices rising with his. Joran lifted the dagger once more, its fire catching in his eyes. "Winter is here," he said, "and so are we." The gates shattered, the dead poured through, and as the first wave struck, the godswood burned with light. Flames of red and gold climbed the white bark, and the roots glowed like molten steel. The air filled with the thunder of battle and the roar of fire. For one brief, terrible moment, it seemed as though Winterfell itself had become a sun in the heart of the storm. Then the snow swallowed everything. When silence fell, only the heart tree still stood, wreathed in smoke and flame. And beneath it, the last of the Starks fought on, their cries lost to the wind. The night had come at last, but so too had fire. Dawn did not come to Winterfell that day. The storm still raged, burying the castle in snow and silence. Smoke coiled up through the drifting flakes, curling from the ruins of the battlements where the flames had died. The world was gray and still, save for the faint sound of wind whispering through the empty halls. Where once the courtyard had been, there was now only ash. The pyres had burned themselves to nothing, and the dead that had marched upon the walls were no more than blackened shapes frozen in the drifts. The air smelled of iron and smoke. In the heart of the godswood, where the great weirwood tree still stood, a faint warmth lingered. The snow had not touched its roots. Red leaves hung heavy upon its boughs, steaming faintly in the cold. Beneath it, the last Stark knelt. Sir Jorun's armor was blackened, his sword broken, his body rimed with frost. The black dagger still glowed faintly in his hand, though its fire was dim now, flickering like a dying heart. Greyfang lay at his side, still and silent, his fur dusted white. All around them, Winterfell lay in ruin. The walls were shattered, the towers half collapsed. The air was filled with the faint crackle of cooling embers, yet in the godswood there was still light, pale, fragile, and alive. Jorun raised his eyes to the tree. The face carved into the white bark stared down at him, its red tears frozen. "Is it done?" he whispered. "Have we held the line?" For a long time there was no answer. Only the wind moved through the leaves, sighing softly like a distant breath. Then, faintly, a voice spoke, not from the air, but from within his bones. "It is never done." He bowed his head. "Then why spare me?" "Because you are the memory." He looked down at the dagger, at the dull red pulse that still throbbed within its black glass. "The fire's dying," he said. "If it goes out, all will freeze again." Fire and ice are one, Stark of Winterfell. Both were born from the same storm. He did not understand, but perhaps he did not need to. The wind was easing now. The snow fell softly, almost gently, and in its hush, there was something like peace. Boots crunched behind him. He turned. Out from the haze of smoke came shapes, living men wrapped in furs and cloaks. The banners of the Manderleys, the Karstarks, and the Umbers rose above them, tattered but defiant. At their head rode a young man bearing the direwolf sigil on his shield. "Sir Jorun," he called. "By the gods, he's alive." The rider dismounted, falling to his knees beside him. "Winterfell still stands," he said breathlessly. "We thought all lost. The fires were seen for leagues, red as dawn." Jorun managed a weary smile. "The north endures," he murmured. "Tell Lord Eddard?" The young man hesitated. "Lord Eddard fell, sir. The last charge. He died with his sword aflame." Jorun closed his eyes. The ache that gripped him was sharp, yet not without pride. He died as he lived, guarding the realm of men. The man's voice trembled. "What of the others? The dead?" "Gone," Jorun said softly. "For now. But they'll return. They always do. The cold sleeps, never dies." He pressed the dagger into the man's hands. "Keep this safe. Hide it beneath the roots of the tree. Tell your sons and their sons after. Never forget what it means." The man hesitated. "What does it mean, my lord?" Jorun looked to the sky where a faint light, neither sun nor flame, flickered in the storm's heart. His voice was barely a whisper. "It means that winter is not an enemy. It is a warning, a promise. The fire that burns brightest does so because the dark will always return." The man nodded solemnly and did as he was bid. He dug into the frozen soil at the tree's base, burying the dagger deep among its roots. When he rose, the red leaves stirred, as though the tree itself sighed. By the time he turned back, Jorun Stark had slumped against the roots, his eyes closed. The frost had claimed his armor, his hair, even his breath. But his face was calm, his lips curved faintly in something that might have been peace. The young man bowed his head. "The North remembers," he said. Outside the godswood, the men of the North began their work. pulling down what was broken, burning what was cursed, tending to the living. They buried their dead in the crypts beneath the keep, where the old kings of winter once slept. And when they laid Jorun Stark to rest among them, they carved no long epitaph upon his stone, only the words that had bound his life. Winter is coming. Seasons passed, years turned like the slow grind of the stars. The snows melted, the rivers thawed, and grass grew once more upon the fields. New generations rose and forgot. But deep beneath Winterfell, in the dark, where the roots of the weirwood spread like veins, a faint red glow remained, a heartbeat that never stopped. It pulsed in rhythm with the earth, quiet and patient, waiting. And on certain nights, when the wind blew from the north and the snow whispered against the stones, those who kept the watch upon the walls swore they heard it. The echo of a wolf's distant howl, rising and fading in the dark. Some said it was the ghost of Greyfang, forever guarding his master's rest. Others said it was the voice of Jorun Stark himself, warning those who would forget. For men forget easily. They build their keeps and wage their wars, thinking the cold will never touch them again. But the North remembers, as it always has, and when the first frost returns to bite the earth, when the long shadows stretch and the stars burn sharp in the sky, those who listen closely can hear the old words carried on the wind, soft as breath, sure as death. Winter is coming. It is the song of the Starks, older than walls, older than fire, older than fear itself. And somewhere far beyond the lands of men, where the snow never melts and the aurora burns across the heavens like a wound of color, the cold stirs once more, patient as time. The darkness remembers too, but so does the fire. And in the deep roots of Winterfell, where the red leaves never wither, both sleep side by side, waiting for the day they will wake again, when the balance must be tested once more. For that is the truth behind the words, the legacy of the house that bore them. Winter does not come only to destroy. It comes to remind the living that they were born of both frost and flame, and that to endure is to remember, always.